Tourette's podcast is not a medical advice show. It's a show about experiences. In the course of that, we may talk about medications or therapies or stories from the doctor's office, but don't mistake any of that for medical advice or direction. It's not. Get that only from people or places licensed or certified to give it. Not from a massively fun and action-packed podcast about our life experiences. Such as...
well, now maybe you could play hide and seek and not be found right away. It's like, hey, you guys want to play... no, I'm going to sit this one out, guys.
This is Tourette's podcast, made possible with support of the Tourette Association of America and part of the Geeks Rising Network.
Please leave your message after the tone.
Hey, so, meow. Hi, I just called to say, meow. I just called to say, I love The Predator. Meow, The Predator. So, come from 2018 Predator. Dude. Ching, brum, 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 brum. You gotta watch it. Mate, so funny. Funny and, everything about it. Ching, meow. Hi. Woof. It's good. Ching, meow. Oh, and did I mention? Meow. Hi. Fuck. Bollocks. Meow. Hi. Woof. Hey. That Thomas Jane plays a dude, meow, with Tourette's in it. Ching, ching. Woof. Hi. Woof. Hoo, hoo. And mate, I'm telling you. Fuck. Woof. Bollocks. Meow. Ed Norton, eat your heart out. Pow.
Hey everybody, thanks for giving me an extra day to produce this episode. I just had to catch up on some things, and this past week has just been bonkers. And first off, I want to thank Chris for leaving us that message on the Tourette's podcast answering machine. I wasn't aware of the Predator character. I'll have to check that out. And Chris, please feel free to leave voice memos for us anytime you want. Really appreciate that. You can too if you'd like to leave a voice message for us about anything you want, about Tourette syndrome or about the sandwich you ate for lunch. Whatever's on your mind, record it and send the voice file to tourettespodcast@gmail.com to be played on the show. And send movie suggestions as well. What's your favorite Tourette portrayal? What's your favorite Tourette-related movie? Lately, I've been referring a lot to Ed Norton's work on Motherless Brooklyn, but I'll have to check out that Predator film that Chris just suggested. I actually learned about a couple others in old movies like Black and White that I was completely unaware of, and I'll talk about that soon. I think maybe in the next episode. It was mentioned to me by the person we're going to hear from, a pretty prominent voice in the world of Tourette science and medicine. Super excited about that. And that's next week. I'm also excited about the Tourette Association of America's inaugural virtual conference coming right up May 15th and 16th. It's free, which is awesome considering what's on the agenda. All kinds of informational sessions in addition to yoga and music from Dylan C. Brady. He's doing the music part. The yoga is somebody else. But there's stuff for parents, for kids with TS, for adults with TS. There's really something for everybody in the Tourette community. There's going to be a talk about Tourette in different cultures. Go to touretteconference.org to get the full info. This again is free thanks to generous donors and supporters. And if you would like to give your support, there's a link up top at touretteconference.org for you to do so. Again, the first ever TAA virtual conference, May 15th and 16th, free. And that kicks off Tourette Awareness Month, which is May 15th through June 15th. I've gotten some more emails about episode 0 of this season, and I really appreciate it. If you haven't heard that one, it's me opening up about putting myself into inpatient care for psychiatric purposes just ahead of season 5 starting, and I was trying to get a hold of what a lot of people with TS deal with. That's depression and anxiety and ideations, and going through that process, which was, a really nervous thing at first, ended up being the best thing ever. I really loved the experience and where it went. It was life-changing, and as I say, honestly, on that episode 0, thinking of your support is one of the things that got me through. And we're going to talk today to the author of a book that I read while in treatment. You want to put things in your head that kind of give you warmth, make you feel like you've got community. And I got that from this book. It's called Twist and Shout. And it was just a really great companion because it was a personal story about growing up with Tourette syndrome and trying to treat it in various odd ways, one of which involved camel's milk, which is not a solution. That's just part of the story here. But the author, Tyler Oberhue, is a seriously good writer and really funny, and I was laughing at every page. It's not the kind of thing where I felt like I already knew everything that was going to happen. Like I could relate to it deeply, but, kind of like with this show, we hear stories from people and we relate to them, but we don't know their story. We kind of learn something new from it. And his story itself had all kinds of, surprises and funny moments. It's not a book for kids necessarily. He's definitely writing it as a totally open and honest adult. And he can get pretty raw, but, from that angle, it's amazing. I think I read it in just a couple sittings. But here, let me read the synopsis from the author, from Tyler Oberhue, on the back of the book right here, just to give you an idea. It says here, one day I woke up with Tourette syndrome, which isn't something I even thought possible at the time. The book you hold in your hands was originally a way to cope with that. I wrote it to help myself, but hopefully it helps you or whoever you were buying this for. It'll become obvious as you read this book that I don't have everything figured out, but I did learn quite a lot since my diagnosis. Things like empathy, which I lacked for quite some time. Things such as how cruel people can be, but also how loving and accepting too. Things like how to be a friend to someone, how to look outside and appreciate the fact that you exist, how to realize that there are people out there that currently do and will love you unconditionally. Within this book are the ramblings of a depressed English major who, with the help of many people, realized that life may not be easy, but it sure is worth it. So that's from the back of the book. And that's, me and the condition I was in at the time, it was the perfect thing for me to read. So in a minute, you're going to hear from Tyler Oberhue, the author of this book, Twist and Shout, which was there for me when I needed it. And as I told him, when he was writing this book, there was obviously no way that he could know that years later, there'd be this guy in a psychiatric hospital reading that book for companionship and levity. And it was really important in that sense, really functional. And I think there's something to be taken from that about, like you, whatever kind of work you do, whatever you enjoy doing, if you have a talent that you want to put out in the world, you should really be proud of that work. And don't second guess it too much. Don't think that it's not worth putting out there into the world because somehow, some way, someone is going to get some kind of value from it. And maybe in a way that you never could have anticipated, like the case here. So Tyler is coming right up. Real quick, speaking of great writers, did you know that Tourette'sPodcast.com does guest blog posts? We've done several of those in the past, and we just posted the first one of season 5 a few days ago. It's great. The author, Emma, who you might know on social media as Life's a Twitch or Life's a Twitch Emma, she writes about her dating experiences, trying to find someone who could flow with her TS, like someone who was a good match for her, and then everything that comes along with it. And she really hammers home the importance of just kind of keeping the value high on yourself and not settling for anyone who can't flow with you, because what's the point? Don't give yourself away. She goes into good detail to make her case. Dating and Tourette Syndrome is the name of the post, and that's at Tourette'sPodcast.com. If you have a writing topic you think would go over well with the community, something we can relate to, but also learn from, send me an email at tourettespodcast@gmail.com and tell me what you have in mind. I've got another one I'll be posting soon from another guest author about the benefits of being quote unquote cursed. So look for that, tourettespodcast.com. And last quick announcement, the idea we mentioned a couple episodes ago of a pen pal group has really taken off. I've gotten a good number of emails from people wanting to be included, and people in the Tourette's Podcast discussion group on Facebook are talking about this as well. I don't want to get too ahead of myself because we're still figuring out the rules and the safeties of doing so, or doing something like this, but just wanted to update you because it's been a popular topic. It's kind of a writing theme on this episode so far. Let's get to our conversation this week. This is Tyler Oberhue, the author of Twist and Shout, An Awkward Life with Tourettes. Got myself some coffee right here. It's kind of a gray day, kind of muggily warm, and there's a what appears to be a mother bird squawking right outside my window near the nest, and I don't know if she's sort of warding other birds away or what's happening, but if you can hear any background noise, that's what that is.
I gotcha. Also, I love your word muggly warm because I understood 100% what you meant, despite never hearing that be said ever.
It's kind of fun how, I don't know, I talked about this on a couple episodes ago, how there's sort of this like secret language, I think somehow within the Tourette community, people just kind of get it. I don't know what it is.
Yeah. I fundamentally agree with that. And that's a big thing with what I do so I like to write. That's why I'm on the show today. But I also work in the special education of a junior high, and a lot of what we do is working with speech and understanding language. Because a lot of the kids in the room, I'm in a pretty low functioning room. You can't really have conversations with them. They don't communicate like us. Mm-hmm. So one kid, great kid. He scripts, which being that this is a podcast about Tourette's, I don't know if you're familiar with scripting. I script. The only thing is I can kind of control it. Like, I do it when I'm alone.
Okay.
This I'm trying not to say his name. The student,
Sure, yeah.
he will say a line from like a TV show or a past conversation, and that's how he communicates. He just repeats the same line. Different lines mean different things. And I'm trying to like figure out his code.
Huh.
And it's interesting. There was because I began my education career at Lindenwood Bell, which I don't know if you're familiar with that.
No. What's that?
So it's a reading center that specializes in dyslexia and hyperlexia, which hyperlexia is where, okay, so the best way I can describe hyperlexia is with this. So the brown rabbit ate the orange carrot. What did you picture in your head?
A brown rabbit eating an orange carrot.
Hyperlexics can't do that. They don't have the movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah, okay.
It's kind of interesting. So I worked with kids like this. It's very common with spectrum kids on the autism spectrum. And dyslexics and hyperlexic, I basically taught them. But in our training session, we had a video. There's a YouTuber, and I sincerely apologize for not doing more research and finding out his name, because this guy was incredible. He has this theory that everyone wants to communicate, they just have different ways. So there was one student he was working with, there was an autistic kid. This kid, he only said shapes. Like, he'd just be like, circle, triangle. Almost Tourettic in a way.
Yeah.
And this teacher, he goes, the kid says square. So the teacher says box. The kid says birthday present. He says, what's in the birthday present? Kid says a puppy. You see the mom in the background on the verge of tears because she's never heard her kid say anything other than shapes. So it's really interesting. But anyway, that's just a little bit about me.
Tell us your name and the part of the world you come from. And we've covered some of what you do, but if there's anything else you want to say to introduce yourself. But first off, just your name and location, and then just kind of what else you do.
So I am T.L. Oberhue. That stands for Tyler Lawrence Oberhue. I am from Chicago, Illinois. And I am the author of Twist and Shout and Awkward Life with Tourettes.
Which I read when I was in the hospital. And that was such a good companion because it's really funny. You're a really good writer. And I think from the first page,
thank you so much.
Like right off the bat, I was laughing. And every page had something in it that just kind of poked me, you know, like there's something I could relate to, or something that made me laugh, or, you know, I brought, I think 2 or 3 books with me, and that was one of them. I think I brought a photo book as well that I could just kind of zone out with, but reading that was fun because it reminded me of the community and, you know, and just things I could directly relate to, and that kind of helped me to communicate things that I was feeling. So we had these group therapy sessions where we kind of had to open up and talk and everything like that. So reading the book kind of primed me to communicate and kind of express myself. And, you know, and the book, you're very honest in it. It's not like the kind of book where, you know, you sit around with the family and read it together. It's, you know,
definitely not.
It's not a book for kids specifically. But it's a very honest book and very fun. And I think it's anybody in the community who wants something kind of warm and funny to read should read Tyler's book, Twist and Shout. When did that book come out?
So it's actually a really funny story. So I'm currently 26. I wrote that book when I was, I'd say 20 years old. That was the very first thing I've ever written. I wrote that book before I went to DePaul University to learn how to write. So that book came out in 2014 under Green Ivy. That was a local publisher. They went out of business, which I really hope wasn't my fault. And so for the longest time, this book wasn't for sale. So in 2016, I republished it under my own name on Amazon. And I made an extravagant amount. I made a whole $2 a month
Sweet.
on that. I know, yeah, it was crazy. Well, I mean, I also didn't understand the industry. Like, I didn't know marketing, or I mean, I was in early 20s. I was just a kid.
Yeah.
I still am just a kid. I don't think anyone grows up until 28. That's my theory. But so in February of 2019, I was picked up by another publisher, Reader's Magnet, that we kind of redesigned it. I made a new edition, which is the edition that you read. New cover. I believe I that was the version I added a beginning and an end, and I believe at the end that's where I said after publishing the first edition, I also checked myself in.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Psychiatric care, and that in itself was its own surreal
Yeah,
experience.
for sure.
I mean, to be to be honest, it scares the living crap out of me because I remember 4 days.
Yeah.
I was in there for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a very there's really nothing else like it.
Yeah, I can relate to that because I kind of picture it as just one smear of time. I remember going to bed on certain nights, but most of it just kind of bleeds together as one ball of experience, and it was kind of surreal because it was such an outpouring of emotion, or just the deepest parts of me were kind of expected to be out in a way where I felt comfortable expressing myself. In a way that I've never expressed myself before. And it was extraordinarily beneficial, but because it was just such an extreme version of myself and an extreme version of self-honesty, it was, looking back, it feels like a different person I'm looking back on. And it feels kind of like a dream.
It's like a different reality. Yeah, it's not, it feels like it's out of
Yeah.
your time spent, whatever you want to call it. One thing I found really interesting, I don't know if you experienced this, but almost in an odd kind of way, a reflection of yourself, because you look at other people in the same area as you, and you wonder, it's like these people have it so much, some of these people have it so much worse than I do.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if you felt that, but I certainly
did.
felt that. Yeah, like the third day, you're like, wow, I am blessed. Whatever you want to call it, there's something that like I
Yeah.
definitely have it good compared to other people, and it's heartbreaking. On the other side of it, that some people are just so far out, and it's just like what can you do?
Well, no, I was doing some of that, kind of self-evaluating, and even at sometimes questioning, like, should I even be here? Like, maybe I'm just fine, and this place is reserved for people who have it much worse than me. And we talked about that a little bit during group therapy about, like your own experience is your own experience. It's hard to weigh your context against anybody else's because, we have starting points and then off we go, and we are who we are in our lives, and we just need to do what we can do to fix ourselves and be the best we can be. And I put the word fix ourselves in quotes, but to be the best we can be. But I was definitely running into other people whose upbringings were just so much more dynamic than mine. And, I was still employed. I could take some time off. I had really good understanding bosses. And there was definitely some heartbreaking stuff that I kind of had to process for myself. And it gave me perspective. Not necessarily that like it got me to stand up straight and say, okay, like I don't really have the problems I thought I had, because I did. But
100%, yeah.
Because I would leave that place and go right back into the context of my own life and experience the same things I was experiencing before I got there. So I was like, I have to see this through and I have to do this my way. But
like, you also have a new insight of like how you view those, like you said, you go back to everyday life in your eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now you have like, how can I reanalyze like that? It's like, to be honest, I was kind of in the same boat. I was working at a tea shop at the mall, and they were understanding, but other people weren't. And, you know, one thing would really stress me out. And then after that visit, I'd be like, okay, like, should I be as stressed about this since other people are, you know, have this so much worse? I mean, I had a job that I didn't like. Other people lost their jobs. Other people's never had a job.
Right. Yeah.
You know, I mean, it really, it's a weird mix of humbling and sorrow. But it's a fantastic teacher.
For sure.
I mean, really, some really dark things are really fantastic. You know, they have a lot of lessons in them. There's, you know what I mean? I think Robin Williams has a quote. It was like an empty wallet, a broken heart, and an empty stomach are the best teachers in the world. I mean, I couldn't really agree more. And, you know, speaking of that, I mean, depression.
Oh boy,
I mean, that's a big reason I wrote Twist and Shout was, I was diagnosed at 17, which is pretty late. I probably had symptoms around 10 or 12.
Right.
Just looking back, I've had a lot of time to look back because I'm stuck inside the house during all this. I definitely think I have some spectrum qualities, especially in childhood, that I'm not gonna say they went away. I just think I kind of like help manage them more because I mean I don't know if that's a little insensitive to say, but also at 17, I was junior of high school. That was hard enough. Also because we didn't really know what was going on. I mean, me and my family had some diagnoses like, okay, well this is probably Tourette's. But to be honest, it was kind of hard to accept because no one else in my family had it, and also we really didn't understand anything about the disorder.
Right.
So it was hard to wrap our heads around like how this could be that. So in the book, as you read, like I detail some weird, crazy stuff I've done. Some not so crazy, some weird. Like, I mean, if I'm not gonna spoil it, but I mean, the camel milk was just bizarre to me. How I don't know how we. And now that's all we're going to say about that. If you want to know more about that, you got to read it. Marketing 101.
It's worth it.
And then, like we thought it was mercury poisoning. We thought all these different things until there was an acceptance of, okay, this is what it is. And to be honest, a lot of other people, at least to my knowledge, of course, in hindsight, you think everyone's against you. Here's a really funny story. Because in high school, I didn't tell anyone when I found out I had Tourette's. I disguised it because it was almost and this is not my proudest moment, a sense of like almost shame or fear of judgment.
Yep.
One of the most popular kids in high school, his brother had debilitating Tourette's.
Yeah.
And you didn't hate this kid. This kid was loved by everyone, including the kids who weren't so nice. So it's like, if I had just been open and honest, my high school experience probably would have been a lot better. You know what I mean? Like, I probably would have gotten rejected to prom. You know that. You know what I mean? Like that was. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I'm just saying, but like, you know, but
I go back and think about that a lot. About like had I been open about it. I mean, I think I had maybe possibly mentioned it to a couple of people along the way when it was relevant to do so, but yeah, I mean, I would say virtually 100% of the time, that was not something I talked about, and I wonder because I think about the kids today who kind of own it and they're on top of it and they have a great way of explaining it to people and they find acceptance. Not saying it's easy, but I just never even gave it a try. I was just locked up about it because of the shame that you were talking about. Yeah,
no, I totally relate with that, and it's funny because like the kid I'm talking about, his brother owns it. Like that, literally one of the funniest people I've ever met in my life. And he actually had, towards the end of the book, and spoiler alert, I ended up having DBS, deep brain stimulation surgery.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, and let's talk about that. I mean, that was life-changing in a way that's, sorry, my phone's going off, in a way that's mostly Well, in order to talk about DBS, we got to talk about comorbidity, which I'm sure is, if you listen to this podcast, you know about.
Yeah.
You know,
Hmm.
I had debilitating OCD. I would make the argument my OCD was worse than my Tourette's.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just because, yeah, you're stuck in a loop. You know what I mean? Like you have to, and my OCD wasn't the pop culture washing your hands and having a clean house. My OCD was everybody hates you. No, it's these thoughts of really
Yeah.
just self-destructiveness.
Yeah. Yeah. I would experience the same thing. Yeah. It's terrible.
It really is. And I mean, it's funny. Well, it's not funny, but with all these things will obviously come depression and anxiety. And so one of the worst moments of my life was before DBS. I was on actually let me list them out. I was on ORAP for tics, which actually blocks dopamine. So for a long time I was depressed. So for depression, I was
Mhm.
put on Prestique, which kind of caused me to be anxious. So I was put on Klonopin and then Effexor. And then to handle all of this, I kind of had bipolar symptoms. I was put on Depakote. And by that, it was complete derealization, which I'm not sure if you've experienced derealization. That is a freaking nightmare.
Yeah. Explain that.
So derealization is actually, to be honest, it's been the inspiration. I'm switching to horror, and I actually have one book published. We can talk about that later. But derealization is you don't feel like this is real. It's not quite like you feel like you're in a nightmare or a dream. It's just this sense of disbelief that it's very hard to describe. To be honest, I think the best way to describe it would to experience yourself, and I would not advise against. I would advise against that. I mean, it is truly. I mean, just to feel that your reality isn't real.
Yeah.
I mean, that is. And actually, I met one other person who's experienced that. That was in my when I went to DePaul for creative writing. I was an English major, hence working in a tea shop. There was a student who she was, depressed and anxious, suicidal, and she experienced derealization. And both of our writings, you could kind of tell, and it was like there was a way with words. And to kind of like branch off that topic, I do think there's a strength to Tourette's that had I known about would have made my early diagnosis in life easier. Have you know the movie Motherless Brooklyn
Oh
that
God.
came
Yeah. I
out?
love it. Yeah.
Yeah, and like his way with he had a ability with words. He could kind of like pick things out.
Hmm.
I'm not gonna. My ego is not overly that overinflated where I can say I have some superhuman ability, but I tend to think I do have a pretty good way with literature writing.
You do.
Thank you very much. It's actually even kind of hard to even say that because I really don't like boasting. like
Yeah. I know what you
I'm
mean.
a pretty confident guy. And especially now that especially after the DBS. To be honest, I really rarely have seen my dad tear up in the Rush Hospital in Chicago. This is insane. The doctor had an iPad that he turned on my. So again, I'm sorry, I'm kind of all over the place, but
No, go
DBS
for it.
they put little devices in what's everyone apparently has a different quote unquote nucleus they call it, where there's a bundle of neurons where the tics originate. And strangely enough, the areas that are responsible for OCD and tics are very close to each other or the very same spot. So that makes you wonder what's a tic and what's OCD? Because, you know what I mean? Like in my book, I specified, I felt like I would look in the mirror and see my jaw was uneven, so I punched myself. It clearly wasn't, but it was an
Yeah.
obsessive thought. So the DBS, I have a bilateral, so in each hemisphere of the brain, I have two devices it's in my frontal lobe, and they're deep in my brain, and I have an iTouch with an app where I can control the voltage and the amplitude and all the components of the device
Wow.
through an iTouch, which is just insane to say on its own.
Yeah.
And those devices are connected down to my temple, where there's a connector, and attached to my temple, there's a wire under my skin that goes to a battery in my chest.
Wow.
I'm on a radio show on a Chicago network called Fluent Radio. It's a fitness podcast, and me and my buddy who run it, we gave ourselves like corny radio names. So he's big guy and I'm cyborg, like big guy and the cyborg coming at you, those classic corny radio names. But no, I mean, like I wear it like a badge of honor. You know what I mean? Like, I am a huge sci-fi nerd.
Yeah.
So to call myself a cyborg really is like that actually brings me happiness. Like, it's kind of. I mean, like, in sixth grade, they called me tie-tie sci-fi to bully me. I wear that as a badge of honor.
Love it. Yeah, this is the singularity.
Yeah, I know, exactly. Actually, side note, my publishing company, which I made to publish my future books, just to get around the whole publisher BS, is Boxhead Books. I have a very big head, and they called me Boxhead in junior high too. So that's two bullying terms that I've used to my advantage. So pay attention, kids. Use your what was that Game of Thrones quote? Wear your weaknesses like armor, so no one can hurt you.
And by the way, you got me thinking about one part of the book when they were doing this to you. Is this when the doctors gave you some headphones to kind of listen to music and calm you down, and it was like Creed playing or something?
Oh, me and my dad drove that was early in my diagnosis.
That was the MRI.
There was a there was a doctor who said there was a connection between tics and TMJ, like a nerve in your jawbone.
Yeah.
And wearing a mouthpiece would stop it.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing is, like, if you look at his videos, there is some success with it. I just think there's so many different variables with Tourette's that, like, it's one thing, like, maybe camel milk would work for someone else.
Who knows?
There's the whole pandas thing, which I talk about in the book too. And we thought that was reality I'm not saying it's not reality. It might be real for some kids. It might be a dead end for others. But, and again, I remember the acronym, Pediatric Autoimmune Neurological Disorder Associated with Strep.
Yeah.
Pandas.
Yeah. Get a lot of emails about that.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I mean, like, again, like I said, is that an answer for some, but not others? I mean, for me, it worked for 2 weeks. But, most modern medicine says that it shouldn't have worked at all. So it's hard to say.
Yeah, I was having a conversation with a doctor about this yesterday in planning out future episodes of the podcast, and we were kind of talking about not about the jaw thing, which I've talked to a lot of researchers, and they're like, yeah, I don't know about that, but with trying anything new, it's so difficult to see what's working and what isn't, just because the nature of TS, the dynamics of it, sometimes it's going to show up and play, and other times it's going to go into quote unquote remission or whatever you want to say. And so if you take something and then, for the week following or 2 weeks after, your tics seem to subside a bit, who knows if that's connected? It could be something completely different going on with yourself. Or, there's also the sort of like wellness feeling of, if you're taking a substance that seems to calm you down, that may, like touch different, stress areas that don't have the chance to inflame your tics quite as much. And it's such a weird kind of like sloppy line drawing of, just to kind of put a visualization on it. Like, I take something then my tics go away or get worse. I have no idea if those two things are connected. It's so difficult to tell.
100%. I live with my dad, and we still say like good days or bad days, and to be honest, sometimes they're random. I mean,
Yeah.
I've had doctors say, like, the weather, like when I was kind of like being prepped, like, well, this is your life now. There was like the weather and the weather really does. At least for me, I can't speak for anyone else, but like if it's too humid, I go haywire, even with the
Huh.
DBS.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or if
That's
I'm like,
interesting.
there was a doctor who I was seeing early on in this, and he made a point saying that he believed Tourette syndrome is not a disorder, it's a symptom of something else going on. I
Yeah.
don't
Uh-huh.
really know how I feel about it. I can see that being true and false, or again, it's who knows?
Yeah, I've heard it phrased as tics or symptoms of other things going on that you may need to put more attention to: depression, anxiety, things like that, OCD, sleep issues, all the other comorbid things that come along. I've heard it phrased that way.
Yeah, and it's an interesting field. I mean, if I was more intelligent, I mean, I would go into this field. But I mean, I got a C in microbiology, so I don't think I'm figuring out I don't think I'm figuring out any medical wonders anytime soon.
So, the book, and also I wanted to ask you too. So the one I have is the one that you published on Boxhead Books. So this is you, but submitting your manuscript other places. Were there? I don't know of any like Tourette publishing houses. So when other publishers or editors kind of get their hands on it and they look at it, what kind of feedback are they giving? Because that was a curious part for me. Is you think about the Tourette portrayals on TV and kind of what producers want to see and what is more sensational to the audience. And I'm not saying your book lacks any of that, because it's really funny and it's really good and it's really honest. But was there any feedback you got on sort of how you were portraying your own life story from the outside?
Surprisingly not. The publishers I was with, they liked it. They were kind of cautious. The first one was, and they're not even a company anymore. And then the second one, they did mention that it is a niche field. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, not many people, you know what I mean? If you're writing like an action novel, the mainstream would be like, oh, I mean, that looks interesting. But if it's a specific field, unless you have a connection to it, not many people are going to be into it.
Right.
I mean, maybe that's ignorance on my end about marketing, but I know from people in my life who told me about it. Like my oldest sister, she kind of thought that she didn't like the name because she thought I was making fun of it. I'm like, I kind of am, like, but it's my, I mean, it's kind of my right to make fun of it. Yeah, it's my right to make fun of it. You know what I mean? It's but like eventually she came around. Like I remember after the DBS surgery, she said, "Well, now maybe you can play hide and seek and not be found right away."
Yeah, that was always I could never play that game.
It's like, hey, you guys, we're playing. No, I'm gonna sit this one out, guys. It's but as for, I really haven't tried to get it like big publishers. I mean, I did originally send it to like everyone I could find. It never really took off like I wanted it to. Like when I republished the newest edition, I sent you a copy on Instagram, and I sent a bunch of other people like Tourette's accounts. There's like really, by the way, there is a fantastic, if you're a listener who isn't aware, like a first time listener, there is an amazing supportive community online, and especially Instagram. So I mean, I feel the need to say that to anyone who just doesn't know that, because I didn't know that until like last year.
It's amazing.
Yeah, there really is. Like I don't know if you follow Tourette's Cop.
Oh yeah, yeah. I've had him on the podcast. We had
okay.
we had a beer last summer in Minneapolis. That was an honor. That was a
That's really awesome.
Yeah. He was super sincere, nice guy, and he's in all of this for the right reasons. And he's like a beacon.
Oh yeah, but I actually I don't think I sent him a copy. Probably should do that. But
He'd love it.
Yeah, thank you. I even sent a Billie Eilish a copy because I don't know if you knew that she has Tourette's.
Yeah, I'm
like, hey, she has like 33 million followers, so I thought if she, shot in the dark,
why not?
You know what I mean? But hey, if you're listening, Miss Eilish, it's for sale on my website. It's only 39 physical copies left. Don't know if I'm ordering more. It kind of depends.
I'll send her a tweet and make sure she gets it.
Like, hey, by the way, yeah. I appreciate that.
Be right back. The Tourette Association of America is the premier nonprofit working to raise awareness, advance research, and provide ongoing support to those with Tourette syndrome or tic disorder. With a network of over 130 chapters, support groups, and centers of excellence, the TAA engages with communities across the nation in an effort to provide tools, webinars, workshops, and support for all seeking assistance. As a primary sponsor of Tourette's podcast, the TAA supports the authentic conversations showcasing the diverse representation of the TS community. To learn more, visit tourette.org, TOURETTE.org. You also have a lot of good, I think, lessons in this book, too, because, especially living in isolation, which a lot of people do when they have something like TS, whether they're open about it or not. I mean, you can have your online community, but then when it's time to go to school or go to your place of work, I mean, the odds are you're the only person there who has Tourette syndrome, whether you're open about it or not. And a lot of people who have a hard time dealing with that kind of thing, may have their sort of escape rituals or substances they go to. I mean, you talk about that in the book, and I really like what you said about that specifically. That I think the gist of it was just kind of like, find something that works for you, something that kind of mellows you out and makes you feel kind of in command for the moment, but don't get swept away by anything. Don't drink to escape. Don't drink to forget, because you're just going to create new memories that you're going to want to forget. And there's a lot of good stuff in there like that, just to kind of remind you that this sucks, but there's a balance here, and we can get through it, and we don't have to destruct, and there's support, and there's answers, and this journey itself is filled with all kinds of stories that are interesting, and that has become one of my favorite things about Tourette syndrome and doing this podcast, is kind of listening to the sort of journeys that other people have been on, because it is really adventurous. I mean, you do get yourself into situations and perspectives that you would not have had otherwise. And
it's almost literary.
Yeah.
Like it's. I mean, things in my life almost follow like a plot.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's funny that you bring up the whole alcoholism, because I mean, especially for teenagers. Because when you're a teenager, social status is the only thing that really matters, at least to the majority. Obviously, there's grades, and we don't know what's going on in everyone's lives. But to the majority of teenagers, social status is either the number one or pretty high up there in the list of priorities. And, there's something to be said about a teenage mind with Tourette's, or really any neurological disorder, because one thing is with like the alcohol. Okay, let's not pretend that alcohol isn't marketed to underage people. I mean, birthday cake vodka, who's drinking that?
Right.
You know what I mean? But it's almost an irony, because when I was like 18, 19, my tics were at their absolute worst. I couldn't go 5 seconds without making a noise or twitching. And I would just get completely sloshed on the weekends with some friends who were really just enabling. And I would be, again, every 5 seconds after a night of drinking, it was every 2 seconds. I still did it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, there's something to be said about kind of a predatory of teenagers whose brains aren't developed and brains that aren't developed like everyone else's. And it's all I can like I said, it's almost literary. I mean, it's like a Greek tragedy. It's like you're doing one thing. Because when I was incredibly inebriated as a teenager, I would I was tick free. It was like I was too exhausted.
Yeah.
So vices can't help, but what is your vice? One thing I started doing, like I mentioned the fitness podcast I'm on, Fitfulness. I, weightlifting has helped me tremendously.
Yeah, I've heard that from a few other people I've talked to on here. Yeah.
And I want to know your theory on that. Like, why do you think that is? Because my theory is that you just exhaust yourself to the point where your whatever neurological structures are responsible for the tics is almost too tired to tics. That's my theory. I don't know. I'm curious what you would have to think.
Yeah, I don't know. And this is kind of colored by some of the researchers and doctors I've talked to, but there are definitely, where you hear about, I was at school all day, then I get home and I start just kind of like, just like blowing out my tics, and they're left and right. There is something about focus, I think, and I'm not speaking as a scientist or a researcher. This is just me just kind of thinking or supposing right now. But based on a lot of different people I've talked to, it seems like there's something about a combination of focus and a combination of like exertion or expression that kind of gives you the same kind of satisfaction. And I've noticed that maybe except that there are some exceptions. Like if I go running, there are certain tics that I have that will interfere. Like I have this horrible breathing tic, and I'm asthmatic, so I have to kind of bring my inhaler with me because I will kind of cause myself asthmatic issues with the way that I'm breathing.
Really?
Like I'll force out these puffs of breath, and it turns into a shallow breathing kind of situation. And when I'm running and when I'm trying to blow off steam and when I am exerting myself. But there are other things that are a little bit more kinetic, where there's more of like a rhythm or a punctuation to it, like playing drums or just doing something where there's some kind of like snap to it.
Like
I
a
don't,
flow state.
Yeah, if I can get into a flow state, if I'm editing this podcast or doing music or something, the tics don't seem to get in front of me quite as much. And I don't know if it's just, again, I'm not a scientist. I definitely relate to that. And I've talked with people like Brittany Wolf is another person I talk with her pretty frequently, and she's into fitness, and that's been a big thing for her. I think that was one of the big things that kind of turned it around for her, to where tics were really getting at her. And once she started with sort of exercise and physical fitness, that activity was kind of like a savior in a way. And I don't really know what it is, but I definitely hear it from other people too.
It's interesting that you mentioned exertion, which I agree with, but also expression. Because I mean, like it's like you said, and I think when you're like editing this podcast, I do fundamentally believe, and this is not supported by science, this is my own hippie beliefs, that there's a reason for this genetic mutation. In today's society, it really doesn't fit in, but I think there's something to do with artistic expression with this disorder. Well, I mean, like again, Billie Eilish. Look, even you are very articulate with words on your podcast. Like the Motherless Brooklyn with words. Dan Aykroyd's an actor. There's a few other. Yeah, there's a few other. David Beckham has Tourette's. I don't know if you knew that. Yeah, you know what I mean, like, and brilliant soccer player. I mean, there's an expressive element, and it's one of those things that maybe would be better explained by like a shaman in the Amazonian who gives you like a potion. You know what I mean? Like it sounds silly, but I mean, I do think there's kind of a reason, and that I'm not even talking about like a spiritual reason, but like a societal or some kind of structure in your brain that there's a reason this. I mean, if you want to speak in terms of biology, there's a reason that this mutation has survived all this time.
That's interesting.
I mean,
Yeah,
yeah.
this kind of, in a way, sort of dips back into the conversation I had with, this was episode 3 of this season with Matt Sawyer, rapper, goes by Nomad, where he was talking about kind of encouraging people to kind of understand kind of where they fit in the world, not based on sort of like the expectation of prestige, but, you know, kind of what are you good at and what can you color in, and you know, where can you leave your signature that nobody else can, and you know, are you happy where you are, or are you just kind of going through the motions of doing what is expected of you in terms of, you know, like a success story is this, a doctor, a lawyer, whatever it is, versus a success story could be, you know, you're an artist, you're doing something that maybe your ultimate goal isn't to make 6 figures. Maybe your ultimate goal is to just express what you naturally feel good at doing, and you can sustain yourself that way. Louis Rossignol from episode 1, an artist he's making his living. He's a professional artist, and he directly connects that to TS. And I feel like, yeah, there is something to what you're saying about whatever this thing is that gets us to do whatever it is it gets us to do, because, you know, like it's a very life-shaping factor. And a lot of us, I anyway, spent a lot of time alone when I was a kid, and that got me into art and drawing and expression and things like that never really left me. And that's something I got to appreciate about myself and wanted to kind of contribute to the world in some way, even though I could be really, you know, modest about it, or no, this is probably not that good, or, you know, that was sort of the, you know, anxiety, self-doubt, self-deprecation part of me. But when you do have an experience that's sort of different from the middle of the road, and I don't know what the middle of the road is, but when you have an experience that's kind of outside of that, then your skill set, or at least how you go about it, is going to be pretty different. And I definitely think there's something to that, to where that should be, I think, respected or at least explored. So we're not kind of going through the motions of life as if we don't have this disability, or whatever word you want to use. I think there's a lot of value in that.
That really is a very interesting point. And I agree 100%. There's another author that I was kind of friends on Instagram, Dr. Michelle Pitts Brown. She was been working with special education kids for like 35 years. She wrote a book, and she had a post, and I keep trying to find it, and it's like buried in my likes.
Hmm.
She has this theory that the disabilities that we are associated with, like neurology, can be abilities. So she has a diagram. It was like Tourette's, OCD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, autism, Asperger's, and she highlighted the strengths of having that like neurotype. For example, I didn't know this. Kids with dyslexia, and I work with a student with dyslexia, and he's one of my favorite students. I mean, he's brilliant. He's just really hard on himself because he's in special ed with dyslexia.
Right.
And when you talk to him and like you see him do art, he has this really, I want to say odd, but that almost sounds detrimental. Like, he's a fantastic artist. And I'm like, buddy, like, pursue this.
Yeah.
And like, I remember I'm a para. I don't know if I specified that. I'm a paraprofessional. I was watching over 2 students in a general education art class, and they just had like fantastic art pieces. But these kids are just so hard on themselves for being labeled this way.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm back to the main track. Dyslexic kids have they may not be able to see written words all that well. They can't really recognize the written words. However, they have a better understanding of complex visual patterns in art and nature.
Right.
And I find that fascinating. And it's kind of like what we said about Motherless Brooklyn and Tourette's. I mean, the words and how you could kind of like put them over here above your head and move them around in almost a 3D spatial way, but it's very complex. But I looking at her research, it's a very interesting that there's it's almost an ability in some ways. It's kind of like, it's kind of like a superhero. I mean, you're strong in one area, you just have this weakness over here.
Yeah, it definitely makes you want to kind of revise the sort of context of what we mean by, disability or ability or, neurotypical or there's kind of like what are the goalposts and why does that matter to begin with? And, if we could just kind of honor what we're good at or what we can bring, and that has nothing to do with intelligence, that has nothing to do with necessarily, any learned skills, but our life experiences shape us in certain ways to where, if you just diagram it, I don't know how you would diagram it, but if you could, you would see sort of spikes that you could consider an asset, like a strength, or, and that strength could be anything, but it's something that could be offered and could be valued. Kind of going back to what you were saying about, being a teenager and kind of wanting to brand yourself as cool, or, just your social status is a really important thing. And it certainly was to me. Like, I was really self-conscious about that. And, it's just, I feel like there's a big hangover from that kind of goes into our adult lives of, we still kind of are concerned with, how our teenage friends may view us now, or how the people around. I mean, yeah, we want to work hard. We want to be seen as valuable and everything. And I'm not necessarily talking about that. Sometimes we just kind of get, I feel like, distracted by our sort of like social grade versus just kind of, and this may sound like the most generic thing ever, but, just kind of being ourselves and letting our talents kind of fly. And sometimes people, I think, bottle them up because they may be kind of anxious or self-deprecating about it, but they're also worried about how this talent may be perceived versus thinking about how it may be applied. And you can really carve out a great niche for yourself to where you can be the one person at your job, or, in the workforce, or just whatever context, who can do this kind of thing. And you have this skill set that just seems kind of is one of a kind because it is shaped by your experience. And maybe I'm just talking way too loosely right now, but it definitely makes you kind of want to reevaluate all this.
Yeah, I mean, no, I mean, I agree 100%. I mean, you said it's generic, but I mean, doesn't mean it's not true.
Yeah,
I mean, there's something to be said about generic advice. I mean, there's a truth to it. But no, I mean, I agree 100%. Like, it's like I'm almost like I'm tempted to like send a friend request on Facebook or Instagram to like kids, not kids anymore, but kids from my high school who like it's like I'm just like, yeah, I almost like a very vain part of me wants to be like, yeah, look where I am now, and it's like that's not healthy, but that is human nature. I mean,
right.
You can fight it all you want. You could listen to YouTube videos about not giving a crap what other people think about you. You're gonna care a little bit.
Yeah, there's some primate stuff still happening with us.
you could almost argue that the act of not caring is a sign of caring because you want everyone to know you don't care.
Right, yeah.
I mean, like, as convoluted as that is, I mean, there's some truth to it. I mean, even Twist and Shout, like, when I first made that, I mean, the first time I published it, I was like, I made money, but nothing like, not bragging money. You know what I mean? Like,
sure, yeah.
I made, you know what I mean? Like, I bought basically beer money at that point, and like I wasn't writing that high for years. Like, yeah, so let me just, like, I got the tab, guys. I'm like, you made $20. Like, oh, well, I made another 20 next week, so we'll and that's not. I'm not even like, again, like the whole self-deprecating. Like, I'm not even. Taking a dump myself in my writing. I to be honest, I do not like Twist and Shout. But I like it more now since your message a couple of weeks ago saying that it really helped you out in a time of need.
Yeah, I mean that's you could never have planned for that. Like like while you were putting that together, you could never have anticipated that this guy in North Carolina was going to message you and say like, hey, I committed myself to improve my situation. It was difficult, but your book, was sort of part of the success of that. I mean, that's...
Oh yeah, I never would have guessed that in a million years. I would have guessed that it would have been like on your nightstand that you're gonna read one day, but you got all these other books, and yeah, you did just buy some books, and you should read first. We all have nightstand books.
That's what I mean, though. It's sort of worth doing it because you never really know what the effects are going to be of it.
100%.
It's kind of weird because there are photographs I've taken that I'm really proud of, and I've put them out into the world, and it doesn't really make much of a ripple. And then I have this random throwaway thing, and everybody's like, "Hey, can I get a print of that? Like, how much would you charge me?" I'm like, "Really?" Oh, and just never would have guessed. And it's just kind of worth just kind of putting it out there, just to. Even if it takes years, even if, if it's 20 years later, if you hear something that contributed value to somebody else somehow, it's like, that's really crazily moving.
Oh, 100%. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, you really don't know, so you might as well just do it. But also, there's something to be said about just doing it for your own sake, too.
Yeah.
Writing Twist and Shout, I wrote that entire book in 3 months. It was my entire summer of 2014. I really didn't go out because I didn't really want to. Yeah, I didn't go out and like party it up because I didn't really feel comfortable. It was good therapy though, because a lot of those sentences and words and phrases, like I didn't really. They were part of me. That's why I wrote them. And it's not that I was lying. It's just that I didn't know if I really believed them myself.
I gotcha. Yeah.
But there's you just putting it out there. I mean, you could write the greatest book, you could make the greatest movie, the greatest song, whatever. If one person listens to it and says, "Hey, that really got me out of a hole," well, then you did your job as an artist.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And that's the point. That's
so this book. It makes sense too that you wrote it in a 3-month period because there's a consistency to it. Like there's a rhythm to it, which is maybe one of my favorite things about it. Is it doesn't drag. Like it goes. The sentences are short and punchy. And you kind of like go in and out of these sort of anecdotal situations, and there's a consistency throughout that kind of invites you to just kind of keep going with it. It's not like David Foster Wallace like 5,000 page novel or anything. It's I got it right here. It's 122 pages. That's one of my favorite kind of books to read because you convey a lot with it. And you go into your story, and there's a lot that people certainly a lot that I related to. And I know the same is going to go for anybody else who reads it. That there's just, it moves fast enough to where you're going to find enough episodes that kind of apply to your life or parallel your life in some way, even though you have your own walk of life. And I really do hope that other people read this who are listening because, it's a lift. I mean, it's a lift. It was to me in a pretty difficult time. So I definitely appreciate that.
And I appreciate those words. I mean, that really does mean a lot.
Where do people find it?
You can find it on my website, www.boxheadbooks.com, or you can find it on Amazon. I don't care whether you buy it. I mean, it's kind of one of those things I just want people to read to kind of better understand. So either one, Twist and Shout and Awkward Life with Tourettes.
I wanted to, I guess, ask here at the end, I mean, is there anything I didn't ask about that you think is important about the book or your life or just kind of your outlook on Tourette syndrome or comorbidities or kind of what it is to just kind of be the person you are?
I think you took the words out of my future mouth like a couple minutes ago when you said just the whole really just being yourself. It's such a cliche, and I'm almost angry just saying it myself.
Yeah.
But it really does make a difference. If you just say, you know what, not so much you don't care, because apathy is worse than hatred. Not so much you don't care, but just so much like, I'm going to do what makes me happy and doesn't hurt anyone.
Mm-hmm.
And once you find what that is in your life, you will hit certain states where it's like you are your ultimate potential. And I think that really is, again, not to go completely hippie on you, but I think finding what that is, that ultimate, what leads to that potential and living in that state is the entire point of existence.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm more sensitive to this kind of thing now because I'm about to go through my, midlife crisis stage, but I mean, what you said about being cool and kind of, how we kind of project, and it's kind of funny. You did hit the nail on the head by saying that, we kind of ultimately want to be seen like we don't even care about the greatness of our status, because I think that's the definition of what cool is. But it's kind of like this weird intersection of wanting that to be the case, but in a sincere way. Like, I care about what I'm doing and I'm really happy with it, and I hope other people like it. But if they don't, well, okay, they don't get it, or they, it doesn't matter. Like, I'm doing what I'm doing and it's making me happy and it's on my terms. And we have to kind of play ball with the world, but we found a way to kind of balance things out for ourselves and be realistic about it and do things that aren't harming anybody, and we're able to contribute our unique talents. And I want people to care about that. But at the same time, if they don't, I don't care either. And it's kind of a nice place. I'm still maybe kind of searching for that for myself, but it's a nice aspiration.
Well, I mean, it's one of those things that I don't think there really is a destination to until it's your final destination. I think the whole thing, finding that, like what you just said, you aren't sure if you found that. I mean, you're not going to until you're looking back. I mean, spiritual or not, you're like, oh, I did that, and that. I mean, the whole thing is the fun in it and the journey. It's like, again, like, not to, we're just a cliche farm today, but like, life is a journey now. And it's 100% true. I mean, when you reach the destination, you're done. So you better enjoy the journey.
I think I'm going to title this episode Cliche Farm.
Actually, that wouldn't be a bad idea. You're like, what is that about? I gotta listen to that.
Okay, give me your feedback on this one. You can reach me at tourettespodcast@gmail.com. You can send a voice memo to be played on the show, or you can just write me an old-fashioned email, and I'll read it out loud. Tourette's Podcast is made possible with the support of the Tourette Association of America, online at tourette.org. And make sure you check out touretteconference.org for the free virtual conference coming up on May 15th and 16th. Also, if you go to tourette.org, that's tourette.org, you're going to find year-round programming. There's a lot of stuff they have going on, webinars, things like that. So grateful for their support. Interact with listeners of the podcast in the Tourette's Podcast discussion group on Facebook. And please thank Sophia for her work there. She's the best admin in the world, doing an infinitely better job of managing the group than I ever could. Tourette'sPodcast.com for past episodes and guest posts from the community. There's a contact form there as well. We're on all the usual social media platforms, and if you'd like to support the show as an individual, patreon.com/Tourette'sPodcast. Thanks so much for being there. Really loving how this season is going, and we're going to do something really cool next week. Mark it down. We'll talk to you in the meantime. This is Ben.